welcome to another episode of Chamber Chat. My name is Jackson Kajenner, Membership Coordinator with the Cold Lake Regional Chamber of Commerce. Today I'm joined by Ken Cobley, President and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, to speak a little bit about the connection that local community chambers have with the ACC. So first off, how is it that members of a local community chamber have a larger voice through the connection with the ACC?
Well, Jackson, in Alberta, we have about 122 community chambers throughout the province, who in turn represent in excess of 25,000 businesses. We have chambers that are very geographically dispersed, as far north as Manning, far south as Milk River, out to the west in Jasper, and east in Lloydminster and Cold Lake. That provides us with the ability to get policies adopted that speak to the needs of all Albertans. And our community chambers are very involved in that. Matter of fact, they're the ones that bring the policies forward. When they bring a policy forward, it's voted on by our AGM, and it becomes policy that then the Alberta chambers can advocate on. So that's how they contribute to the larger voice.
Yeah, definitely. You get a larger voice with all the community chambers coming together. So what kind of advocacy efforts has the Alberta Chambers of Commerce undertaken throughout COVID-19 to help ensure conditions are good for businesses?
Again, we depend very heavily on our community chambers. When this whole pandemic thing started, we immediately went to a daily e-blast out to community chambers because the information was changing on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. We also instituted a weekly call with community chambers to find out what was going on in their community. What were their members telling them? What were the issues that they were having? So it became readily apparent as we moved into it and as governments started to introduce their assistance programs that we were hearing from the members via their community chamber that the wage subsidy, I'll pick that example, wage subsidy started off at 10%. Our members told us, no, that's just not going to work. It was then increased to 75% with the sunset of June of 2020. That, again, through our advocacy, was extended to September, and now it's been extended to June of 2021. The rental assistance program the feds introduced is another one that we were heavily advocating on. And that one, the way it originally was designed, was probably doomed to failure right from the beginning because it depended on landlords agreeing to it. Through our advocacy efforts, the government introduced a new rental subsidy program in September, which allows the tenant to actually apply directly. The business assistance loan, which was a $40,000 interest-free loan with $10,000 forgivable, there was a lot of members who fell through the cracks and just didn't meet the requirements for qualifying. We managed to get the government to change those guidelines as well as expand that program. It's now $60,000 interest-free loan with a $20,000 forgiveness. So primarily what we've been concentrating on is getting information out to the community chambers, finding out what's working, what's not working. And those are three examples of the things that we've been advocating on during COVID and directly affected to COVID. Our advocacy efforts on our normal policy book were somewhat limited through the pandemic. Obviously, you can't meet with ministers and officials directly. However, we found that government and our chambers and myself adapted to this new reality of Zoom, and our engagement with the governments, both federally and provincially, has increased dramatically over the past 8.5 months.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of advocacy efforts that have been going on through COVID-19, and the rise of all these video conferencing, even the ease of use, even just today to have this interview with you being up in Edmonton there. In recent months, we've seen the Alberta Perspective surveys coming out in our newsletters and emails and things like that. Can you explain a little more about them and why it's so important for our members to be
sure
these surveys?
The Alberta Chambers has always done surveys. In May of this year, we adopted a survey platform that was developed by our colleagues in British Columbia. It's called Vision Critical, and our brand on it is Alberta Perspectives. What that allows us to do is it allows us through the community chambers to go out and survey the business community and get hard data back. And that's data that we can use. And I can say, okay, X percentage of businesses believe this, X percentage of businesses believe that. And I'm speaking with certainty because that's what the individual community chamber members are telling me.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have anecdotal stories and what you've heard, but it's critical to have that data, and that's actually enhanced our ability and credibility with the provincial and federal governments as well as media, because we've been able to get out there, tell the story, and say, look at, and what the beauty of that platform is we can actually parse that data down by individual communities. So if, for example, and we get a tremendous turnout from Cold Lake and region on these Alberta Perspective surveys, we can actually feed that data back to the community chamber so they can see the province-wide opinions, and they can also see what's happening within their own particular region based on postal codes. So it's a very powerful survey tool. We've done, I think, 5 surveys to date. Stay tuned for more. And the other thing it does is if there's something that, if we require a rapid response to something, say government introduces new policy, we can go out with what's called a hot button survey, 1 or 2 questions, just to get a pulse on what the business community is feeling about a particular issue. And then we can rapidly comment on it as to what's going on. This supplements our policy book, which is, I think we've got about 80 on the books right now, but that supplements that. It gives all added credibility or added strength to what we're saying in those particular policies.
Yeah, definitely a good value for everybody to be completing those surveys. So that way you can be guiding, like the chambers need to know what's going on
That's right.
on the ground. So that way they can guide where they're going and such. In September, the Alberta Chambers of Commerce held their AGM and policy session. One of the approved policies was entitled Access to Physician Supports Rural Economic Development. Now in Cold Lake, the number of doctors is an issue that has been raised in the community. So what are the next steps taken by the Alberta Chambers of Commerce to advance this policy now that it's in the policy book, along with the other policy that would be in the book? So what essentially are the next steps now that it's approved?
That particular policy is a very powerful policy, and it reinforces what we've known all along. Rural doctors are key to economic development. They're key to just the economy within your own community. I'll share one quick story with you. Manning, for example, 14 years ago, they had 2 doctors and a hospital. They lost those 2 doctors. What ended up happening is folks drove to Peace River to get their doctors, to get their medical appointments. Drive to Peace River, what happens? You end up not only going to your medical appointment, you end up buying everything that you probably need from the big box stores, head back to Manning. That has a direct economic impact on the smaller communities. Where it goes from here, we've sent the policy off to the Minister of Jobs, Employment and Immigration, because it's an economic issue. And we've also sent it off to the Minister of Health. And that's normal procedure for us, because what we do then is when we're sending those policies over to the ministers, we ask for direct meetings with them. So we're just in the process right now of scheduling meetings with the various ministers. So I look forward to bringing that one forward to Jobs, Economic Development and Employment, as well as the Health Minister.
Okay, yeah, that's a good overview as to how they get advanced once they're all approved at the AGM. Now, kind of for the final question, what do you see as the most important thing for getting our economy back on track and recovering from the COVID-19 impacts to businesses?
That's an interesting one, and that's with the getting back to Alberta Perspectives. That's why when we sent out the impact of COVID survey, we also included what the impact was, as it has been, on Alberta on the price of oil and gas. because we headed into this pandemic with our economy in a much weaker state than a lot of other provinces, and with a lot more headwind because of the low oil and gas prices. What we need to get the economy back on track, obviously, if you could wave a magic wand and get a pipeline there starting to pump, obviously that would go a long way towards improving the price that we get for our natural resource, as well as stimulate some economic development. The other thing that I was pleased to see was the government coming forward and announcing additional economic diversification moves. Certainly, I think we've recognized that we finally do have to diversify the economy. Oil and gas will be with us, I would say, for another generation at least. However, we do need to start looking at other strengths that we have in this province. Things like value-added agriculture, feed the world. Why are we shipping raw product out of the country to be developed? Why not produce it here at home? Same thing with petrochemical diversification. Government just recently announced an enhancement to that program. So I think that there's no quick fix, unfortunately. I hate to say that. There is no quick fix. However, there is potential now to lay the groundwork for future economic prosperity. I was really pleased to see that the latest job statistic numbers for October are out from StatsCan, and it shows that the unemployment rate has dropped by a full percentage point in Alberta. We're now almost back to pre-pandemic levels. I got to tell you, one of the things that really scares me is when we see the numbers in COVID-19 rise as rapidly as they are, potentially seeing government reacting and maybe doing targeted shutdowns, because a lot of businesses have struggled for the last 8.5 months, just to survive. They're getting back to a situation where I won't say that revenues are back to normal, but certainly they are better than they were in the midst of the pandemic. I think even the limited lockdown would have devastating effects on the small businesses, and therefore would have a devastating economic impact.
Yeah, thanks for your insight there as to what would hopefully get our economy back on track, and definitely good to see that the unemployment numbers are looking a little better for Alberta at least. Ken, I'd like to thank you for taking the time today to sit down and do this quick interview here. And we hope for our viewers you will tune into our next episode of Chamber Chat.